I love talking to people, and I love being friendly. I so enjoyed it when I was playing music for dances, and we were very successful. I love to entertain. My real name is Jim Millward, but they can call me James Bergen Millward. And my grandfather was named Orson Bergen DeMott, and I am James Bergen Millward, but you can call me Jim, or you can call me Jimmy, just don't call me late for dinner. My father, he led the singing in the church for 25 years. Ironically, he'd keep his grocery store open until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Sundays, and then he'd go to sacrament meeting, which was around 6 o'clock in those days. And he, on his mission up in Butte, I told you about it, he was in Butte for 13 months. He was in a quartet. Quartets were really big back in those days, and they were on the radio regularly. And in those days, the radio had a lot of local talent going. And so they were on a weekly radio show. He had to either decide to go to college or on a mission. He decided on the mission. And so my mother said to him, "Now, if you want me to be here when you come back from your mission, you'll marry me now." And so they did that. They were married right before his mission. But it was a hard thing for her. I've read his letters home. She kept every letter that was ever written to her. You like to think that missionary letters home would be about the people that they're working with and who's getting ready to get baptized and how the conversion rate is going. And instead, it's all about everything's fine, I love you, and this will soon be over with. He doesn't say that, but that's what he means. My big brother, his name was Joseph DeMott Millward, and my grandfather, Joseph Eastham Millward, had a nickname, Jody. And Jody was 4 years older than I am, and so I looked way up to him. I remember his friends were way older than me. There was no way I was going to play with them because they were too old. He was very musical. He sang, he played the guitar. I remember he taught seminary up in Moses Lake, but up until 2 in the morning, he would be at the turf club singing and playing country music, and then he'd be teaching seminary at 6 or 6:30 in the morning, early morning seminary. I had to look up to Jody, and which I did. He started piano at 6 years of age, so for 4 years I got to hear him take lessons, and I kind of thought that sounded like a lot of fun. And at age 6 I started, and at any rate, I love music. And it all started that day. I remember walking up to it. It was my turn. I was all smiles. So though that piano has followed the family and it stayed with my sister, and it's out at Cuna, so it sits down there along with my father's butcher block. He was a butcher, and so she has those two memories. And so music was a big part of my existence right from the beginning. My little sister Annie is 2 years younger than I am. Well, she married my wife's brother. That's quite unique there. So we have a sister and a brother married a brother and a sister. You got to be careful how you say that. And anyway, Annie raises horses. He's got 40 head, and that's horses is their thing. They just love it. In fact, they got married right after Larry and I did in 68. They got married in the Salt Lake Temple in August, and Larry and I beat them to the altar. We were introduced by them in the Harold B. Lee Library at BYU. That takes care of 2 of my siblings. The third is Tony. Tony is 10 years my junior. He was kind of the caboose. And I'm trying to think of something positive to say about good old Tony. Well, he was an outgoing, fun-loving guy and a good musician. There was a LDS band from Portland that needed a guitar player. They already had a bass player. Well, I needed to get into a band. I've always loved to be in bands. And so I needed a guitar. And Tony, as a missionary, went down to Sacramento, where he was working as a missionary, found in a pawn shop And anyway, I ended up with it and played in that band. Let's put it this way, things did not go well. He had a divorce after 6 children, and he had issues, and his diabetes really got bad. And he finally, at age 49, died. He had one guy that was a guitar player, that they were partners, and they were very good friends. And the guy was at Tony's burial there in the cemetery. I noticed it, and I went up to him, and who are you? Well, I'm Tony's guitar player. And he put a pick on Tony's casket there. So I put my pick on the casket. I was born in Idaho Falls, Idaho, in the LDS hospital on the 24th of July. So I started off with a strong LDS leaning, didn't I? And it looks like I'm going to end up there. I don't know how many more years I've got left, but I love the church. And my mother had graduated from that same hospital as an RN. So I had some kind of roots there. And we used to drive on our way to Boise. We would stay in the motels, and in the morning I'd pull down the shades and tell the boys, see that hospital right there? I was born in it. See that temple right next to it? I was married in that. I remember my baptism in St. Anthony, Idaho. The building no longer exists. Sailors' hats were in there for a while. I remember my brother took my sailor hat from me. I had a comb. I was pretending like I was Hitler with the comb up to be the mustache, and so I was ticked off at him. So I threw the comb at him, and he dodged the comb. He went down and hit his nose on a stack of High C orange drink cans and split his nose. He died with that scar on his nose. But I got my sailor hat back. So I was playing the baritone in the student band. And our teacher was in a band of other school teachers in that vicinity. He was called the Many Sounds of Nine. And they played for a dance at our high school. And his name was Bob Pritchett, my inspiration. He played the 3/4 bass, and I heard that. I went over and listened to that. Oh my, that is super great. I gotta learn that. So I said, listen, I love that bass. What's next? Anyway, he got me started. He didn't give me a series of lessons. He gave me a fingering chart and the positions. And so I was making good progress. His name was Bob Pritchett. He said, this boy needs his own instrument. And so he went to the superintendent of schools and said, this young man needs an instrument, and his parents shouldn't have to pay retail. They should pay wholesale. Will you use the school to purchase a wholesale instrument? No, we won't. So Bob Pritchett was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He went to the Mormon bishop. His name was Herman Fielding. He said, Bishop Fielding, this young man needs an instrument. Will you buy it through the church, wholesale price, so his parents only have to pay $150? He said, sure. The Fender basses had only been around for about 10 years. In the early 50s, they started coming out with the Fender basses. So I obtained myself, for $229 of my own money, as I recall, a Fender P-bass, which is, oh my goodness, there it is, my old friend here. I went to see Elvis Presley at age 14. My big brother, I couldn't drive, I was 14. He took his girlfriend, but they drove up to Spokane. Elvis Presley, this was in 1957. He was just barely beginning his outstanding career. And Elvis, the thing I remember about it is some of the girls next to us in the stands had an interview with him. Boy, were their hearts all aflutter. Well, when I was a sophomore, I decided to be Bergen. I had it put on my Letterman sweater, And there's only one guy I know that still calls me Bergen. He was in my old rock and roll band, the Riptones, which was an important part of my life. So in the Riptones, there was a stud singer, we called him. I'm just going to call him his name. It's part of my life, John Draney. And he was like Elvis. He was up there. We look at the backside of him for a lot of years. The drummer was a cousin to the lead singer. Both of them had the last name Draney. The guy that taught me guitar at age 12, his name was Roy Christian. He was the lead guitar player, and we played down at Pascal at a television station there, and we started getting jobs all around that area. There's very few towns within a circumference of 50 miles that we didn't play at. Quincy, Washington, Odessa, Washington. Anyway, we were kind of high, wide, and handsome for a bunch of pimply-faced 17, 18-year-old kids. And we were our own managers. We didn't have a manager. We just took it as it came. We started an every Saturday night dance. And what we did is rented the hall and put on the dance ourselves. We were just kids and charged admission. And we'd pick up, in those days, 20 bucks a piece. That isn't bad for those days. I did 4 years of football, lettered every year. Now this is a small school. Here's my class ring. In 1961, I was not a great athlete. I was a center. That affidavit I have explains how I did as a football center. And in my patriarchal blessing, there are 3 gifts that the patriarch said that came with me from the other world when I was born. One of them is faith. And as you maybe can tell from this interview, I am a believer. And you can't insult me out of the church. If you told me my beard is way off and don't you be coming back here to this meeting ever again because of your appearance, I would say, oh yeah, well, you're not going to stop me because I believe it, and I'm not going to let your opinion affect my belief. I have complete faith in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the whole restoration. The second gift that I was given is friendliness. That's what it says in my patriarchal blessing. Am I a little bit outgoing? I'm afraid so. In fact, I've been told that I am inebriated by the exuberance of my verbosity. And, and that's a pretty good description. And the third gift that I was given is music. And it's so obvious that I just love music and all kinds. I like jazz, I like rock and roll, and classical. I'll listen to the NPR radio and listen to some of that classical music, and I love it all. And so, what do? It's time for college. No money. My dad said, Jim, I'll pay your college. You are going to go to BYU. My brother, 4 years older than me, he changed majors many times. And my dad got tired of that because he was kind of the financial. But he told me, he said, Jim, this idea of changing majors every semester, don't cut it. You're not making any progress towards a degree. So he kind of put it to me that I needed to declare a major and stick with it. Now, I was in the grocery store with Dad, and I couldn't help but notice that the salesmen would come in, and they were the nicest people. I just really enjoyed those salesmen. They treated me wonderfully.
So my dad is very outgoing. He spent his career as a salesman, and he is not afraid to talk to people, and he's very persistent to get what he wants, and that has served him well, and it's something that I think I could admire and try to do in my own life.
I thought now I know about groceries. I've been kind of raised in a grocery store. Why don't I become a grocery salesman?
I do have memories of going with him on his job a little bit. We would go to the different stores in Montana and make sure that the Betty Crocker and all the General Mills cereals were on the shelf just the way that he wanted them and everything.
And how do you do that? How do you become a grocery salesman? Well, the first and most important thing in those days was get a degree. And in what? Business. Sure, I can go for that. So I started off in business. And that's what I took as a freshman, not the upper division, but the basic economics and accounting and business courses. And it was agreeable with me. And then eventually, I think it was after my mission, I noticed something that I was really tasty at, psychology. And I had a total of 10 hours of semester hours of psychology, and I enjoyed it a lot more than the math in business. Business is basically math. And so I decided I'd switch to psychology. And I went around and made all the changes, had all the cards ready to go. And it came to me, if I went for psychology, to use a psychology degree, you necessarily need a master's degree. Otherwise, it don't cut much ice. In those days, it didn't. In my mind, that's what I thought. But a business degree will open the doors to a sales job, just as good as psychology. In retrospect, I would have enjoyed the course more, psychology, because it just interests me more than 2 and 2 is 4. And so I decided to stick with business. I went to BYU and took the Book of Mormon class. And in page 420, Moroni 10, 4 and 5, it says, "And when you shall receive these things, I would exhort you that you would ask God the Eternal Father in the name of Christ if these things are not true. And if ye shall ask with a sincere heart, with real intent, having faith in Christ, he will manifest the truth of it unto you by the power of the Holy Ghost. And by the power of the Holy Ghost, ye may know the truth of all things." I put that test sincerely. They emphasized in the class, you want to know if this is right, get down on your knees and find out. I did that, and I found out. The bishop called me in June and said, "Jim, how about a mission?" And I said, "Well," this is what I said. I can't help it. It's a little stupid, but I said, "I don't know if the church is true." And then he kind of looked at me. I said, "But I do know the Book of Mormon is true." And he said, "Well." So if the Book of Mormon is true, the church has to be true. And I knew the Book of Mormon was true, and I guess I'd never really equals, so. And then I got the spirit of missionary work, and I remember my preparation. I was eager to go, and I got called to Tennessee, Kentucky. And I'm going to sing you this is part of my legacy, right? Here's a little song. "Dear old Kentucky and West Virginia and Tennessee, thou art dear to me. Doors ever open, kind, friendly people." Oh my. Yes, I was on my mission when JFK bit the dust. Interestingly, there was a lady that lived across the street from us, and she'd been a little bit arm's length-ish. As a Mormon missionary, you usually get that out of most people if they know who you are, and that's the reason they don't want to have much to do with you. And we were used to that. But this day, she was quite, I'm not going to say friendly, she said, "They've shot the president." And you know, we're so oriented as missionaries to the church. I thought, President McKay? No. And so we went up and listened to the radio. I figured that was okay. Anyway, so the mission helped cement my belief, although at age 19, to be married in effect, by married I mean just 24 hours together trying to accomplish the same thing was not easy. Different personalities. There was only, I often say there's only one companion that I really liked. He lives in Burley, by the way. But the goal is to go out and teach the gospel. So that part of it, in fact, there was one guy that he got killed in Vietnam, but he and I didn't get along terrifically together as companions, but we had a commonality of let's get the gospel taught, and that was successful. There was quite a nice group of conversions. From the time you graduate high school, you have 4 years to complete college, and then your time is up and you have to go in the Army. That's how it is. Drafted, be drafted. Vietnam, and that's my era, Vietnam era. And so I had 2 years of college, 2 years of mission. My number was up. I got the notice, you are now A1. That means you're going to be drafted. Well, mankind, I don't want to be drafted. I'd read up about Vietnam. I knew what was going on over there. I did not like the idea of being out in the field there and getting shot up and then having the Viet Cong come over, and if you're still alive, they'll make sure you die because they'll shoot you again. And I had visions of greenery above my head and blood dripping off of it. My blood, right? I don't want to do that. And so I looked around for National Guard. All National Guard units just stay at home. They don't go to no Vietnam, that's for sure. Well, I checked 3 states and they're filled up. You know, everybody was trying to do the same thing I was, to stay out. There happened to be openings in Rexburg. Cool. I could transfer my Rex credits directly to BYU. No problemo. That put me into my junior year of college. And the draft board wants me to come and forward, ha! and so I transferred up to Rick's College and joined the National Guard up there. Be on the lookout for an eternal mate. And this is good advice. And start praying to meet that person and that the Lord will prepare somebody for you. And I did that. Now there was some LDS girls that were eligible, but Catherine Smaltz was a real good pianist. She wasn't the prettiest gal. And I asked her, I says, how do you like the church? What do you think of the church? She says, oh, it's okay. That's not good enough. I need somebody like Larry who, she'll be here in the morning on that bicycle right there, and she reads from the Doctrine and Covenants, the Book of Mormon, the New Testament, church, the Ensign magazine. If I'm in here, she'll read it out loud to me. That's my reading, you see. So she's helping me, but she's devoted and really likes the church. And she's been, well, I could name you off her offices. She was a Stake Relief Society president up in Montana, and she's been a Relief Society president several times. And she's a good organizer, and well, she does a good job around the house too. You know how she is. How can you throw rocks at her? You can't. You cannot throw rocks at her. And she's the one that was my answer to prayers. Like I said in Missoula at a testimony meeting, said I did not have to pray about Larry when I met her because I'd been praying for the right girl for many years. And so it was obvious when that happened that it just fell into place. And that's the answer to my prayers. Oh my goodness. Oh, how do I get around this one? Oh my goodness. I think it was homecoming, and I had a date with this other gal, and Larry and I had been, I'd been going to her apartment for dinners because that's where Dan and Ann, my sister and her brother, he had that deal, $1 a night, and you get dinner for $1. And so I got well acquainted with Larry there, and we were starting a romance. We were, in spite of the fact that I was dating this other gal quite regularly, and I was dating Larry surreptitiously, I think you could say. We were just friends, and I wouldn't call it hanging out. I think we were romantically interested in each other, and I felt bad. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but here I was going to homecoming, not with the gal that I'd prefer to go with, you know, and it was just a matter of social demands at the time because I was going with his other gal, not Larry. Larry and I were a side deal, right? But we had genuine interest. And so I told her I felt badly that I wasn't taking her. I says, look, why don't we just get married? And she seemed to say, no, I don't know, why not? We'll give it a try, see how it works out. I used to have that picture in the desk here. I don't know what happened to it, but it said, well, true love, I hope we know what we're getting into. You know, you kind of have to take a leap of faith. I've got one word for it. Starts with C, compromise. Because you're not gonna get everything you want. You have to give what that other person needs. You can't ignore the other person. It's not selfish, it's for them, for them. And when you're involved with the other person, you're more successful. Most important decision I made was when I asked Ray to marry me. And the result was those 6 children, which I can't throw rocks at any of them. They're all upstanding, contributing citizens. And I think that I've been accused of being a little bit of a workaholic at times. And I had to kind of put the skids on that and pay more attention to the family. I realized when my children were getting to be, well, I think the oldest boy was maybe 10, that we needed more family time. So we made a tradition of reading a good book every night, and that good book turned out to be the scriptures. And is that a good book? I'm afraid so. And we went through all the scriptures except the Old Testament. Larry says we never did get the Old Testament covered, but we got all the rest of them. And I think it taught the boys how to read, for one thing. They would help each other if the little guy is like 6 and just learning how to read with their one sentence. Usually everybody would read one sentence and then we'd move on. It was a little bit of a tease, I'm putting it mildly. And so we wouldn't set Joe next to the other children. We'd set Joe on the other side of Larry by himself so that he wouldn't be pinching. That's just his nature.
One memory I have is him visiting the high school, pulling me out of class. He called me down, he went in, called me down from the office. I got out of English class. I thought there was some emergency, and the emergency was I needed to get a bunch of guys together so we could play basketball after school. And so we did that a lot. He brought a lot of people together through basketball. There was a guy that I haven't thought of this guy for years. His name, he called himself Emphysema John. And he was this big barrel-chested guy. He hadn't played a lot of sports recently. He'd huff and puff up and down the court. But I think he appreciated the friendship of the guys. And then there were also guys from we stayed in a hotel when we moved to Missoula. We stayed in a little motel while our house was being built, and there was John and Steve Martin. And Steve was a really good basketball player, and he played with us for years. And we just had a great relationship with him, and a lot of fun times playing ball with my dad. So I appreciate that about him.
Large family, 6 boys, and boys like to eat, and it was Valentine's Day. And I came home with a large box of chocolates. It was a heart-shaped Valentine. And little Steve, he was about 3 or 4 years old, and he said, "A Valenheart." And ever since that, then I call Valentines Valenhearts.
He would drive for a living. He had the territory of Montana, and a lot of times he'd be out on the road, and I think that he really loved driving and his cars. And so I just loved being in the car with him. Sometimes he'd take us on his business trips in the summertime when we weren't in school. And other times just when he was home and he wanted to go to the fitness center or wherever it was, driving in the car with Dad was always kind of fun. And he always had radio stations on that I typically wouldn't listen to, things like NPR. And so I kind of gained an appreciation for talk radio and for some music. One of the memories that stands out the most for me with his vehicles, we were still in Great Falls a couple years before we moved to Missoula, so I probably would have been about 8 or 9 years old. And his company car, he always had Pontiacs. I think his company car was on the fritz and had to be in the garage for a week or so. And so he got a substitute vehicle, and he chose a hot red Pontiac Trans Am.
He had to get a rental car once, and of course he got a sports car.
And that thing was very sporty. And I remember he was really kind of proud of that and looked forward to driving it. And he had all of us boys get in to go for a drive. But if you're familiar with the Trans Am, it's not going to fit a bunch of boys. And he didn't want to leave me behind, and so he took me along by having me crammed up in that spot underneath the back window. And he would, gun that car and go off and peel out the tires. And I'm sitting in the back, kind of stuck up against the glass. And but it was a lot of fun, and it was just a really fun memory to have of Dad and of how much he enjoyed driving.
Every time these boys would leave on missions, I just was so happy.
You were assigned to labor in the California Carlsbad mission.
California.
And then their return, when they would report, a lot of times they'd have sacrament meetings to report, and I just gloated, oh, look at that, those boys, they did a good job, I love it. Well, to be honest, there's a little ego involved here. As a member of the bishopric, you get a lot of adoration. And people look up to you, oh my gosh, there's a member of the bishopric. Maybe he can help me. Or you get that call from the bishopric saying, oh, we would like you to talk in church.
Yeah.
And so you get a certain amount of respect. I remember that respect. I was in two bishoprics. And that was probably, I'm going to say, my most popular calling. But I was a ward mission leader for a long time.
I had the opportunity to be his home teaching companion for a lot of years. There was a widow in a nursing facility. Her name was Teresa Saunders. I even remember her name. Not sure my dad would, but I do. And one day we went to visit her, and she was not very communicative even. In some ways, for my teenage brain, I'm like, what is the point of this? But Dad always made a point to go and visit those people. And as we were visiting her that day, he would lean in really close and try to speak loudly because she didn't have a lot of hearing left. And he was trying to explain who we were and why we were there. And at one point, I remember he kind of glanced over at me and said, I'm not sure we're doing a lot of good here with this. But right after he said that, she put her hand out, and he held her hand and talked quietly to her. Just a great selfless act of charitable service that nobody saw but me. Sister Saunders had her eyes closed the whole time, and that was such a great example of what it means to serve.
And the old missionary harness is something that I wear pretty well. In fact, at my funeral, I have asked that the song, I might get emotional here, how beautiful upon the mountain are the feet of those who bringeth glad tidings, who publisheth peace. In other words, missionaries.
I was, of course, his home teaching companion for a lot of years, and so we would have, the PBS radio going on, and then we would go and visit these families and talk for an hour or two, it seemed like. And he was such a character. Nobody got sick of hearing what he had to say, because he always had a lot of humor.
Just the gospel has everything that you need because of the people that are involved in it. You can find your best people that are, not that the church is the greatest, but you're going to find better people in the confines of the chapel than you will in a bar.
And now in more recent years, he's highly interested in music, and he arranges musical get-togethers on almost every day of the week. And I'm able to participate in one of those. It's a lot of fun.
I so enjoyed it when I was playing music for dances, and we were very successful. And even down there at BYU playing for the Arizona Club with my brother, I loved to entertain. That I was outgoing and cared about the other human being. I cared about that other person, that they got a feeling that I cared about.
Awesome. Is there anything I missed or anything you want to talk about that we didn't cover?
What's for supper?